And welcome back. Well, if you're following the video series in order to recap the previous video, we got our radiator mounted, we got our condenser mounted, we got the first bits of the, or I should say first bits, but we got the procharger intercooler mounted, as you can see, which entailed moving the horns, getting those mounted to a custom bracket that was in the procharger kit, and it also included pushing the power steering cooler down about a couple inches lower than that was the old factory mounting point. That's now procharger's bracket, and that's the new mounting point on their bracket. So it came down about a couple inches. And we also discovered that while editing the previous video, we forgot to install our windshield washer reservoir, so we went ahead and took care of that as well and just kind of spliced it in to the previous video. And we got our lines squared away here on the side as well for our air conditioning manifold into our condenser, and our transmission cooler lines also into the transmission cooler side of the condenser. And when we were first looking at putting our interduct piping in, we started with making the modifications to this pipe and another 90-degree elbow per their instructions. And then we got to a step that said we needed tube 316. And I couldn't find it in the kit. I also couldn't find it in the bill of materials that came with the box. Instead, what they had was tube 293. Now, I originally looked at it and couldn't see how I could get it to fit. So, as stated in the previous video, I called procharger about it and asked them. And apparently, tube 316 and tube 293 are in fact the same tube. So 293 is formerly known as 316. So with that said, what we need to do is get the inlet side of our intercooler plumbed in. So what I have here are the, five sections of pipe that deal with that. This is the piece that goes on to the down on the lower port of our intercooler that we trimmed yesterday. We got the 316/293 tube, infamous tube here. You can see it's kind of a double 45, a little bit of a, I don't know if you call that a double 45 or an S pipe. We've got this straight pipe with a little fitting on it. This is for our anti-surge or pop-off or blow-off valve, however you want to call it. We've got another double 45, but this time in just a rubber pipe, a 90-degree elbow, and then a strip of protective rubber. Now, to help with this one isn't too bad. This is a silicone pipe here that we trimmed. You can see it kind of has like an orange interior on it. These are just plain rubber hoses here. So getting these metal tubes to fit over it can be a bit of a pain. So we're going to employ our silicone strategy for these rubberized pieces. And in this case, rather than using the paste, I'm just going to use a little bit of silicone spray on the outsides of these fittings in order to make moving and inserting these tubes easier. And why I say that is we're going to leave all the clamps loose, because you're going to find out, if you haven't done one of these kits before, that you want to leave everything loose and everything kind of fits together like playing a big game of Jenga. You know, you're going to be twisting certain sections, inserting certain sections deeper than other sections, just trying to get, you know, the best possible alignment and get this to line up. Because with all of this being mostly rubber and some of this being metal, you've got a lot of forgiveness here as far as angles of pipes and being able to twist pipes sideways to get stuff to line up. So we want to make sure we got everything where we want it first, obviously, before we clamp our pipes down. But having things lightly sprayed with a little bit of silicone is going to help make these adjustments a lot easier. This strip of protective rubber, from what I can see based on their pictures, it's going to go right here on this piece of the support. So I'm going to clean this off and see about getting this stuck onto there, because eventually we'll need to be there when we put the sections in for the discharge section of the intercooler. But it'd be easier to put that piece of rubber in place first before we even put the inlet in, otherwise we're blocking part of it off. So it's gonna get rather interesting. There's not a lot of space in here. There's just enough space in here to get the inlet and outlet connections made into this intercooler. And I've taken the liberty as well of kind of prepping this and popping a lot of these Christmas tree clips off of this side wiring harness. Like for instance, it goes all the way down here, and this has got the passenger side airbag sensor that clips on the grill. But it also had a Christmas tree clip that was eating up part of the wiring harness, so I popped that one loose. And I also popped loose the Christmas tree clip up here. This wiring harness clipped into the plastic part of the radiator support. And what that is going to allow us to do is just kind of take this harness and push it off to the side when the time comes, so that way we got, you know, just a little bit more room to get the intercooling piping through there. So with that being said, all that being said, what I'm going to do, let me get this again. I'm just going to spray them very lightly with silicone. You don't want to go crazy with the silicone on these, because you can actually, if you put too much silicone on there, you can actually pull those pipes apart, even if you have clamps on the pipes. So again, that's why I say just a light coat, enough to help us kind of easily move things around. So I'm going to get these sprayed, and I'll bring you back and we'll start putting our pieces in. So one moment. And welcome back. So just want to show you, I've got that piece in there again. The best I can determine from looking at their pictures, you can see it's stuck to that side member there. Again, just cleaned it off with a little bit of degreaser. In this case, we just use a little orange champ. And I did cut a small square of that material off, and I'm going to save this for later, and I'll show you where I'm going to put that. And there's a reason for it. Like I said, I don't know if I mentioned this, but I did go through and kind of test fit the upper and the lower hoses in here, and the inlet, or I should say the outlet, where it's going to discharge, kind of rests right up against this AC manifold. And if that's still the case after we adjust everything, what I want to do when we get to that step is just take this extra block that we cut off and just kind of do this with it. Again, just giving it, just trying to put a barrier in there, just so that we don't inadvertently, rub through or damage that manifold in some way, shape, or form. Let's see. Well, back to their instructions. And again, we're dealing with the 2011 to 2017, so there's not as many pieces and joins in it as with the 2018 Plus. You notice with the 2018 Plus, the inlet is on the side, but it discharges through the bottom. That's pretty similar to how our 2016 2500 is set up. It's a little bit different. The 2016 2500, the inlet's on the bottom and it actually discharges from the side. I don't know, it's a little bit of trivia for you. If we go back to where we were at, and you'll notice this is for 2011 to 2017 trucks only. If you have a 2018 Plus, you skip the 28, so that's not us. Obviously, we're going to leave the hose clamps loose like we spoke about. We've already trimmed off the 1 inch off our silicone hose, as well as one of the 90 degrees. Did that yesterday in the video, if you remember, or in the previous video. And that silicone boot, the 90 degree long leg silicone boot, is going to go on the bottom here. And I've already got a hose clamp kind of prepped, and that's kind of the direction. We just want to make sure we leave the hose clamps faced in such a way we can kind of easily get to them. So this lower hose is going to go on like this, and this is going to be a bit of a tight fit. In the previous video, if you remember, we shifted the intercooler over to the left a little bit in order to make room for the windshield washer reservoir to go back in. As such, it got a little bit closer to the side here, and that's one of the reasons why for them having you trim 1 inch off of this initially, so you could shorten this up and make this a little bit easier to do. So what we can do is get the top on there and just kind of twist and pull and prod like that. There we go. And let's see if we can get our clamp unstuck. Okay, yeah, I gotta get where are we stuck on? There we go. So the nice thing about this being a silicone boot, on this bottom one, it's a bit more forgiving. So there we go. So we're ready with that one. Again, we'll leave it loose. And you can see the other nice thing about this being silicone is that it does kind of rest and get pushed a little bit on this lower piece. Now, I did this on the 2500. I was debating doing it here, but I kind of decided not to do it. Is that there's nothing behind here on this plastic piece of this radiator support. If you were so inclined to do so, you could kind of just take a Sawzall and kind of cut this way and cut this way and kind of just remove this triangle piece, and that would give you a little bit more room. But like I said, I did that on the 2500 because it was so tight going through here with the discharge pipe, just to give it some more room. Because I'm debating on this one. I'm probably not going to do it unless it just really comes down to needing the extra little bit of space. Okay, so I'm just pushing this down to get it more into a position where it was rounded. It was kind of coming up and being a little bit mushed. Okay, so that's about as down as we can get that one. Still looks like a piece of pipe. Now for the infamous pipe that we thought we were missing. So again, just to reiterate that, apparently if you're looking for tube 316, if you were in the same boat, apparently the 293 tube they send you is the same thing. And that is this one right here. So we just, oh, I gotta, hold on a minute. I forgot to spray these. Let me get these sprayed a bit and I'll bring it back. One moment. And welcome back. Okay. So again, we've got just a little bit of a light coat. I actually took a towel and wiped off as much of the excess as I could get. And what we need to do is put this piece in next. Their diagram kind of gives you a general idea of what it should look like once it's all together. And what I want to do is this next clamp, it looks like it would be easier if we had it facing this way in order to gain access to it. So if we put it on like this, that way we can see it, we can get to it, we can tighten it. And just to confirm, let's see, that's a 52 hose clamp, 52 hose clamp. Okay, so everything I'm using so far per their book, and it looks like the majority of these clamps are what they call their 52, the number 52 hose clamp, and you'll see that actually etched on the clamp, and it looks like it goes from 2 3/4 inches to 3 3/4 inches. So if we take this S pipe, I may have to put some more spray on that. That's still kind of rough. But we're a pretty good distance in. You can see we're up to kind of where the bend starts. See, that's the deal, is that this one may have to go in a bit further to give enough clearance for everything else to line up further down the chain. So I'm just looking for the next piece. It says to install the double 45. So we need this one here. I'm just gonna shoot a little bit of spray silicone inside of the ends of this double 45. Let me get you moved over a bit so you can kind of see that we're now dealing with this end of that pipe. The book doesn't say to use silicone on these. I mean, obviously you don't want to use so much that you've got a puddle of it sitting in there, because you know this will eventually end up in the intake system. But I did do this. I used the paste silicone you see me use on this channel before when we did the 2500 install. So, well, we obviously can't have it twisted this way because it hits up the supercharger. So if we take it and we twist it this way, oop, got to get a hose clamp on it. Once again, let's go with the clamp facing out, or the tightening mechanism facing out, I should say. Oh yeah, much easier to get that hose on there. Okay, so we're on there a pretty good bit, right to about where the bend begins. And now for the next piece. So surge tube 109. Again, another 52 clamp. So that's the surge tube 109. This is the one that will have that valve eventually put on it. And I don't know, it's like I said, I've seen some individuals put this where this is facing up, and then some individuals put it where this is facing down. It's really going to depend on where we've got the most clearance to put the rest of the purge solenoid in. So for now, it looks like if we face this up, then the purge valve and filter looks like it can kind of rest within here. So for now, that's what we'll do. And if we have to alter it, we will. So I've got that seated in about as far as that'll go. And it could probably go a little bit further if needed. And then we need an uncut 90-degree So we need to install an untrimmed rubber elbow onto surge tube 109, then you connect it to the outlet of the supercharger with two number 52 clamps. Clamp out of the bag. don't need to put any silicone. Let me get your hand up here. I don't need to put any silicone on the end that'll go in the supercharger. The powder coating makes it pretty slick to get over that. And I may have enough. Tell you what, let's do this. And I'm just going to put just a hair of a spray. Nothing major. And that's what I'm doing. I'm just putting a little bit of silicone spray and kind of wiping it around the inside edge. And then just wiping off any excess. Again, just enough to coat it. So what we have to do is go from here to here with this 90. And as you can see how much far off that is. You know, this would have to go down and come in. Let's see, probably about yeah. I would probably have to come down about a good 2-3 inches. So this is, let me zoom you out and I'll show you what I'm talking about. And welcome back. Let me get you, there we go. That's a little bit better view. So you can see we're not anywhere near the supercharger output. And we kind of have things pushed in about as far as we can push them in. Yeah, that one's in about as far as it'll go. That one's in about as far as it'll go. So is everything down the line here. So they kind of come out to 1S, then correct it. Interesting. So this is where it gets fun. This is where we kind of have to play with fitment until we get it to where it needs to be. And I'm thinking, well, I don't really want to. Yeah, I don't really want to trim any of this hose back because, yeah, it'll get too far into here and start to be basically interfere with those pieces. I don't know, like I said, they were pretty adamant and said that was the same piece. But as you can see here, we got a bit of a size issue. So I think this piece is too long. I know they said that's the same one, but I don't think that's right. We can't twist this 45 to 45 to go the other way because then it's facing the supercharger and then it wouldn't line up. I mean, we're lined up as far as where we need to be. We're just too tall at this point. Okay. So let me do a little pondering on this, and if I have to, I'll give them a ring and see what they got to say about it. But let me do a little bit of thinking, and I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. So we're just in the process of making some trim cuts here. And if you remember in the previous clip, once we had everything assembled, the pipe that comes out that hooks up to the anti-surge valve was actually too long. There was no way you were going to be able to kind of get enough of that pipe to seat into this elbow to get everything to align up. So I called procharger on this once again just to confirm, and they did indeed confirm that 293 is the replacement for 316. That 316 is just an obsolete part number. So I explained to them what was going on, and they confirmed that we can do this. I didn't want to do it without, them saying it was okay to do because the book didn't mention it. Is that when they ship these hoses are probably a little bit longer than what they should be. So armed with that knowledge and armed with the okay from their tech support, I'm going to trim a little bit back off these elbows first and see if we can get everything to kind of line up and seat and then we'll go from there. So I'm going to take about 1 inch off this one right here to start. You can see we're using the method we did yesterday. We're using a just tie wrap to do an even marking all the way across. And I'll trim these up and I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. Well, after a little bit of trimming, a little bit of poking, a little bit of prodding, a little bit of prying. Hopefully you can see all that there. You can see that we've made our interconnections at least to our inlet pipe at this point. I did go through and kind of mark everything with a Sharpie as far as where the hoses were and where they lined up, and you can kind of see the orientation. That was about the best fit I could get for this piece. I need to get the small hose in here and kind of see how that's gonna fit for what we need. I may have to come up on this a little bit because this is right up against that but you don't have much grab. That's what I don't like about this particular piece, is where this bung is at. You don't have as much grab on the hose to the pipe that you do. You kind of got that right there is the end of the pipe, so you probably got about 1 inch, maybe about 1 inch, 1.5 inches in there. But so per procharger, we ended up trimming 1 inch off of this one, this side, I believe, if I remember correctly, and 1 inch off this side elbow, and 1 inch off that side elbow, and finally just kind of twisted and contorted, and having the silicone spray helped with that. Now this S pipe, which was in question, you can kind of see how it ended up. So it kind of goes in this way, comes down, snakes, and goes this way. So the S itself kind of goes like this, with the outlet pointing, let's see here. Yeah, the outlet's kind of pointing this way, and then that second 45 to 45 is then taking it and going this way and going up that way. But it's all in place. We just got to disassemble it to get the necessary clamps around this. And this end looks a little bit off because I did, like I said, we did trim 1 inch off of this because this is on a 45. It kind of looks at an angle. That clamp will grab, like there's the end of the pipe. The pipe is pushed all the way here. So when that clamp grabs, there's still plenty of meat for it to grab onto. But what I'm going to do is go grab the little J pipe that sticks in here and goes to the valve, and we're going to see how well that clears. So one moment. And welcome back. So while we have everything all nice and siliconed, we just took this center piece here and rotated it over so that the port the purge valve connects to now comes out kind of more towards the bottom inside of this space here where there's more room. So that means you can probably, let me get you over there where you can see that. You can see the tip of that hose coming out right there. So that purge valve will end up coming out either this direction or that direction underneath. And if we have to, we've got enough slack in this purge valve hose this way and that way that we can even trim a little bit off if we have to, just to kind of bring it up and out of the way if needed. But yeah, I think we'll go with that, with this pointing down, because it gives us our most avenue for space. I did see one individual online that kind of rotated this up and had the purge valve coming out this way on his install. So basically here's the hose, and if this would be the purge valve, he just had kind of laying that way. And I think that would also work. I think that would also clear the hood as well. So I think maybe that would be the best bet. Or down here where we got it would be a good bet. Just over here where we had it up against the wall, we would have had to trim a lot off this hose to get it to fit. Again, not that we couldn't get it to fit. I think it would work either way. You just got to do a bit more trimming. So I'm going to get this center pipe marked up with our 2 hoses right where it sits. Disassemble all of this and get some hose clamps on it. And before we put the hose clamps back on it, because you can see we also had to rotate this a bit more since I marked it, so I'll have to mark that again. Once we get before we get the hose clamps on it, I'll bring it back and I'll kind of show you the direction that this S-bend ended up going in, just in case you need it. So one moment. And welcome back. So let me get you a light down in here. You can kind of see how this S-bend ended up. It kind of comes down and then kind of kicks out. And then the other 45 kind of takes it from there, gets it to snake around to where eventually it'll meet up with the purge pipe and then that 90 bend coming off the supercharger. So I'm going to work on getting some clamps on here loose. Then once we get everything situated, I'll look at start tightening some items down. Yeah, because I think we're good where that sits right now. Okay, so let me get some clamps on this and I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. So you can see we got hose clamps kind of staged and ready. We got our marks lined back up where everything kind of fell into place. And I know the book says to tighten all of this up to this point, but I want to leave that loose in case we have to adjust something. I'd rather get the discharge piping, which again starts out with this elbow on this upper port and will work its way over into the intake over there. So I want to get all that in place. Actually, yeah, we can leave, now that I look at it, we can leave this section loose, but this section is going to have to get tightened because what happens is that discharge port comes up through here, literally, through the square and this high square shape and then a high side line. And it's going to block access for us to get to those fasteners. So yeah, let me do that. Let me tighten these clamps and get them situated. And then we'll work on getting the discharge piping in. So let me tighten those up and I'll bring it back. One moment. And welcome back. So we've got our 2 clamps down there tight. And I went ahead and tightened up the one that came out of the intercooler. So the remaining clamps, these 3 clamps here, we'll tighten these down once we have our anti-surge valve and everything in place and kind of make sure that we don't have to rotate this anymore in order to do it. So the next step is going to be getting our discharge side of our intercooler taken care of. And we've already did step 8, which is taking the trimmed elbow we did way back in step 1 and put it on here, and it is got its hose clamp at the ready. And we've already kind of popped loose the wiring that you see here just to give it some more slack. That's what I was talking about earlier. We popped that Christmas tree clip off, and then there was another Christmas tree clip down below where the airbag sensor goes into the bumper, and that kind of, you know, and the one that went right over here into the side of the radiator, plastic part of the radiator support. So that gives us a little bit of free movement inside that harness to get these next couple of pieces in, because it's fixing to get tight. So we did that. Remove AC pressure switch wiring, tree lock from the core support, installation of tube number 271. Place rubber tape onto the core support as shown for vibration reduction. So we already got the rubber strip in here, and this is what I was talking about earlier. We put that one on the side at the beginning of the video. I saved a small chunk of this that I think I'm probably going to end up putting right about in here somewhere once I retrieve where I dropped it from, because I think that U-shaped piece that we're getting ready to put in there when I was test fitting this was actually hitting this manifold a little bit. So let me go grab some pieces and I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. So this is kind of what we've got going on. You can see that we've got our 90-degree elbow here coming down. This piece is going to end up snaking its way through what little space remains on this side of the radiator support here. And you can see that down in there. And it's going to come out, and this elbow is going to hook into one of these ends. This then comes out and kind of sits like this down inside here, and then there's a coupling here, and then finally a piece that goes from the coupling over to our intake. So let me wrestle with this a bit, because this is going to take some doing. I'll need both my hands to kind of get in here and manipulate this, much like we had to kind of manipulate the charge side of this. So let me do some poking here, and I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. So kind of let me show you what we've got going on here. I'll just slide this tube out again. Is that you can kind of see the way I'm just inserting this from the front because it's easier, and just kind of getting the bottom part in and then pushing up on this. And that's kind of where it's going to sit. Now what I had to do was take this wiring harness and kind of pull it up so it sits on top of the little bend that's in there. Otherwise it was trying to grab a hold of this wiring harness on the bottom of this pipe. So if you kind of just pull it off to the side like that, then we've got, you know, as you can see, plenty of slack in there that we can, you know, wiggle our wire, and we're not really putting pressure on anything, which is good. And I think what I may do is slide that little block of rubber right in between there, but I want to get all the hoses and everything on first, because once we have all the connections made, it may pull it off to the side like that, kind of on its own. But either way, I think when we're done, I'll just put that little block of rubber in there just for some safe feelings, I guess. So what we want to do next is get this situated, get this angled correctly. And then, like I said, we'll just leave everything loose until at least we get up to the intake part of it before we cinch anything down. So the next piece is going to be getting this into position. Let me spray some silicone on this. I'm going to fight with this for a bit, and I'll bring you back. One minute. That might be nice to show you here. So we sprayed this end with silicone. And just like with anything else with this interducting, it just takes a bit of manipulation and kind of finagling items. And what I'm doing right now is just pushing this elbow as far onto this elbow, this metal elbow, as I can, to get the clearance to at least get it down far enough to get it onto our port. And then once it's on the port, then yeah, we can kind of grab the whole thing and kind of twist it and get it back into position. Like I said, it's very tight space. It's very much like putting, you know, a puzzle together or playing Jenga. You've got to get everything to kind of line up, and then it will fall into place. But I'm going to continue to kind of manipulate this, and I'll bring it back. One moment. And welcome back. So in the previous clip, we were putting our elbow on our discharge side of our intercooler, getting it hooked into the metal elbow that kind of runs underneath. They then had us install this 3-inch coupling, which we have hose clamps at the ready, and also they've got a 3.5-inch to 3-inch reducer that we have hose clamped and secured onto the throttle body. They did have us remove a 1/2 inch from the top, from both sides, so top and bottom. Then we secured the bottom with a hose clamp. And we're just kind of, again, we're just leaving all this loose, but just to show you, even though it is tight quarters in here, we still have movement on our wiring harness. None of that's being bound, none of that's being sat on or held up. And it's probably kind of hard to see But I did put that one little block of rubber we saved earlier. I'm just going to tap on it with the flashlight because it's hard for me to see in the viewfinder. I don't know if you can see in the camera, but it's right there. And even with that block of rubber on there, we're still not coming into contact with our air conditioning manifold line. So yeah, you want to talk about a tight fit. I mean, it's not rubbing. We've got space in there. So yeah, you might be able to see it better through there. Possibly. Let me get a shop light in on the other side of that. And maybe that'll help highlight it a bit more, but there's yeah, there's definitely a gap in there. Not much of a gap, but there is a gap. So they pulled it off. Like I said, it is tight quarters, but it does go. So what we're working on now is, since we have a 2012, we were in the process of getting the grommet that was in our package of hardware yesterday installed into our piping here. And what's going to happen is that's going to be the grommet that holds on to our incoming air temperature sensor that we need to remove from the old intake boot there, and then just basically get installed in through this grommet. So I'm going to work on getting this grommet into this pipe and getting that old sensor out of that boot. And I'll bring it back. One moment. And welcome back. So you can see that we got our temperature sensor, our inlet air temperature sensor, moved over from our old intake and plugged into that grommet for the new one. And this piece should go in here something like this. And of course we still have to get it seated, but that's the reason why I haven't tightened up the clamps on that 3-inch coupler coming off this discharge port yet, because I want to see where it's gonna set before we start tightening stuff down. This one I think we can go ahead and put in. There we go. We're good there. That's about as far as that we can go with it. Yep. And this end here, yeah, I'm gonna have to manipulate this U-shaped piece here. It's coming up underneath in order to get this to finish lining up. So let me go ahead and tweak on this for a little bit, and I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. So we got our discharge tube, we got a coupler tightened under our U, our discharge tube hooked up to our throttle body, and the clamps are tight at this point. Let's see, let's get our inlet air temperature sensor plugged back in, shall we? And of course, like all the other connectors on this truck, we're going to need a little shot of oil. Shot of the old WD. There we go. I don't know if you heard that click. And we can hit our lock tab. All right, awesome. So inlet air temperature sensor is now reattached. We are pickup tube reattached, and yes, I see the dent right there that happened in shipping. Looked like they dented and scratched it. I've got some black touch-up paint. I'll hit that here in a little bit and take care of that. Oh, so the only clamps that have not been tightened, we can go ahead and tighten this one up since that's discharge. And then we can come back now and visit what we've got going on here and get this situated. Go ahead and get our anti-surge valve set up. So let me tighten up this clamp and I'll bring you back and we'll take a look at this piece. One moment. And welcome back. So I just got the air filter loosely mocked up in here. There's some PCV stuff that we have to do in conjunction with this, but it's just laying up in here to get an idea. Now you can see with that there, that's where our surge hose hooks up to. So we still have kind of all this space down in here that we should be fine with. So now, to be fair, in the manual, they have this piece on the other way, pointed down, and they have it kind of going down in this direction here, which would work. Kind of would look like something like this. So it would hook into the adapter and kind of look a little bit like that, kind of down where these transmission lines are at, which that would work, but it's got a moving mechanism and everything on it. I just want to make sure it kind of stays potentially out of the elements. Again, that's the way they designed it. I'm sure it would be fine, but I think we're going to go up here. That way it's kind of utilizing this bit of space up here and maybe a little bit more kind of out of the elements. So I'm going to start by trimming about 1 inch or so off of this one so we can kind of get that to clear, get it plugged onto that point there, and that'll give us a better idea of kind of what we're looking at. And I went ahead and took their barb off the top of it because remember, we're going to replace that with our own fitting, in which we're going to use some of that pneumatics that you see right there sitting on top of the Milwaukee bit set. We're going to use some of that pneumatic line to make our vacuum connection into that block that we installed in a previous segment. So let me get this trimmed up and I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. So you can see that we got our anti-surge valve, as they call it, or blow-off valve or pop-off valve, however you want to refer to it. Got everything in, got all our clamps tight up at this point, up to that point. Went ahead and changed out their fitting with our right-angled quick connect fitting that we were looking at in the previous video. And you can see it should support itself quite nicely in this area. We know there's enough room for it in this area because it's not going to hit the air filter. Plus it had the big old air box here anyway, so shouldn't be in danger of hitting the hood or anything of that sort. And the air filter housing slightly rests up against the frame, so that'll help dampen any vibration on it, so that'll be nice. So again, you can see that I like putting them, face up, make sure that nothing's going to interfere with this mechanism movement, because again, that's a pretty critical piece unless we want to start breaking stuff should something happen to that. Let's see, what we got to do now is get our tubing connected so that we have our vacuum boost source to that valve. And again, that's going to come off of that block that we put in right there in a previous video. You see the blue tip. So a couple of different ways we can run our line. I pointed the right angle kind of coming out this way, so we could just follow the existing wiring harness back there and just kind of keep it along with this, or we can just kind of come across the intake, come down underneath the supercharger, and also connect into our line. I tell you what, for ease of running it, why don't we just come across the front of the intake. Gonna keep me from having to climb all the way back there to the rear of the engine, and plus it's one less line to have to worry about should something happen to this and we need to get quick access to it. There's plenty of spots we can tie wrap it down to secure it. We got the main wiring harness here. We got a couple of pipes, the vacuum source pipes there we can tie it down to, and we've got our radiator hoses here. Actually probably won't do it to the radiator hose. We may come, yeah, we got a wiring harness that comes all the way down here for the oil temp, oil pressure, and knock sensor and such. So we could come all the way down, come up, come all the way down to this point, and then come across and then up, and I think that'll do it. Yeah, we'll just keep it, we'll just put a little gap on it just so it's not resting on that heater core line. Although I do believe it'll withstand the heat on it, but I don't want to test it in the same breath. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to hook into, well, just to show you this here. So what we're going to do is take our line, as you can see right here, take it, push it in place. There you go. Once it bites it, it's bought it, and the only way to release it is to push down on it. And now we can just run the appropriate length of tubing that we need and get it secured. So I'll go ahead and do that and get it plugged into our surge valve, and I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. So I just want to show you here. You see, remember we plugged into our manifold piece here and just followed some existing lines just directly across the front of the intake there. And you can see we come down, one more zip tie on the wiring harness, and just kind of looped it down and straight into our connector. So we now have a vacuum / boost source hooked into our anti-surge valve, and we've got all of our hose clamps tight at this point. So I think the next and probably last thing that we can do in this video, because we're getting kind of long again, is, let me grab the bag. There it is. You can put our coolant recovery tank, or a replacement coolant recovery tank, onto our system. Because remember, it used to live over there, but now that's the home for our intake and discharge ports. And I think that what if I remember correctly, they've got us installing it somewhere here on the passenger side. So let me go grab the book, and I'll be right back. One moment. And welcome back. So I looked over the instructions for installing the replacement overflow tank for the radiator. And it's referencing removing some bolts that would normally be there if you had the fan and the fan shroud in place, which obviously at this point in time we do not. So what I would like to do is, I think we've got enough material in this video. We'll cut the video at this point, and then when we come back, we can see about putting our upper and lower radiator hoses on. We'll finish that task up. We can get our big V6 electric fan in here, because remember, we're not going to be reinstalling the clutch fan, or at least that's not the plan currently. And part of the retrofit kit, they actually give you a spacer, and we'll cover that more. So if you were going to keep the clutch fan in here, there's a spacer to space the fan out, so that way it clears what it needs to clear without causing the issues with the belts and such. But either way, we won't be using the spacer because the plan is not to put the mechanical fan in. But we can do upper and lower radiator hoses. We can see about getting the electric fan dropped in here, and then once that's in here, we can see about doing the replacement overflow tank. Once that's, I can also look into, I'm going to look into how the catch can installs on the system. And if I remember correctly, the catch can just goes between the PCV port in the back of the intake and its port right here at the front of the intake. If that's the case, it won't interfere with the work that we have to do for the procharger air filter. If it's not the case and it does use the same port or the same setup that the procharger filter is going to use, then what we will have to do is figure out how the catch can and the procharger filter are going to coincide with each other. Like I said, I don't think that it does, because this is the port right here that would normally go to the air box, and that is the port they're tapping into. And like I said, I believe the catch can is a go between the PCV connection and its connection on the front of the intake. So, but again, I will verify that. So in the next video, we are looking at doing upper and lower radiator hoses, the electric fan, getting the supercharger air filter in place, which includes its PCV modification. And I think that'll be good for starters. We may get to a few more things while we're there. But either way, to recap what we've done in this episode, if you remember, we finished up the intercooler piping. So we've got piping that now goes from the output of the supercharger into the intercooler, out of the intercooler, and then finally directed over to the intake. To the intake, aka throttle body. We moved over our inlet air temperature sensor and got that connector connected. We got our anti-surge / blow off / pop off valve, however you want to call it. We've got that situated in its home, and we have its vacuum / boost line connected into its block. Let's see, and I think that was the bulk of today, but let me tell you, that took long enough to do, in my opinion. That's enough for this day's work. Like I said, it's takes, I don't want to say quite a bit, I don't want to say cumbersome, but it does take quite a bit of time finagling these hoses, getting them to lay where they need them to lay, getting them to lay straight. And if you remember per our previous conversations, we called procharger a couple of times just due to some fitment issues we were having, and we got the okay from them to go ahead and trim off the excess hose that we needed. So that took care of that issue. Everything's done, everything's bolted. We're steadily getting there, but we still have a handful of more items yet to do, to include once we finally apply power to the vehicle, doing a code scan on it, making sure it still sees all its sensors and bits and pieces, and that we didn't do anything to the wiring harness or break anything. Provided none of that has happened, then we can hook a coder up to the truck, download a copy of the code or the current software settings, get that over the tuner so he can make his necessary adjustments to account for the cam as well as the supercharger, and then we should be able to go for a first startup there. We need also before that, yes, we need to purge and fill our coolant system. So we'll be drawing a vacuum on our coolant system, verifying we don't have any leaks, and then filling that up. We've got our power steering fluid that we need to get filled up. We've already installed our oil filter, if you remember, in a previous episode, and pre-filled it with oil. We just need to get the rest of the crankcase filled. So we got about 6.5 more quarts of that same Lucas engine braking oil to add in as well. But like I said, a lot of work done. Still got a handful of items to do. And with that being said, I will let you go and bring you back for the next one. And once again, if you have subscribed, I thank you immensely. If you have not, please consider doing so. Thank you much. I'll bring you back for the next one. Bye.